Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&As, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. Hey coach, I love the content, keep it up. I want to work on my explosiveness on squats and I'm not sure how to go about it. For years in college I was a national level rower and I didn't do any heavy weight training at the time. Now that I'm done with my rowing career and I've started lifting heavy again, I've noticed I have good explosiveness on deadlifts, bench and push presses, but I have none on my squats. I'm not sure why. And I would have thought that since rowing is also being explosive, that would have helped me on this. I've even tried taking my weights down to about 60% of my 5 rep max, and I still find myself moving through the bottom range slowly, but the weight itself is easy. Curious your thoughts. Cheers. All right, brother, what I'm going to recommend you do, if you want to increase your explosiveness out of the bottom, you need to start doing more pause squats. And that's fine. Start down with 60%. And what you need to do to build speed, you need to do triples. You need to do no more than 3 reps. I'm not saying you can't do singles and doubles, but you can generally create maximum bar speed and maximum acceleration 3 times. So triples seem to be the name of the game for that if you want to get the most volume possible while doing so. You need to start doing triples with a relatively light weight, and you need to start doing pause squats. You come all the way down to the bottom and pause. You stay as tight as possible. You come down, take a deep breath, make sure that you're upright, everything is tight, and you pause for 1 to 2 seconds at the bottom, and then explode up as fast as you can with 3 rep sets. Don't do over 3 reps. Start doing this over and over, and you will eventually find that your speed from the bottom will start to increase. But you're going to have to practice it. You're going to have to practice staying tight, getting a deep breath and holding it, and then driving as hard as possible out of the bottom. You're going to have to do this over and over and over. It's not something that you're going to get with only 1 week. It's just not going to happen. You're going to have to work on it over time. But if you do that, your explosiveness will improve dramatically and it will get you where you're trying to go. But again, you need to be doing 2 to 3 rep sets. Don't be doing 5, 8s, things like that. And you have to focus upon the pause at the bottom to get faster at the bottom. That's the best way to do it in my experience. All right, next question. My partner is over 400 pounds and wants to lose weight, but he starts having back and ankle problems if he does walking cardio for longer than 30 minutes. What are the easiest lifestyle changes he can make to get his weight under control? Thank you for the great information, as always. Well, okay, here's the thing to look at. If he's having problems when he hits 30 minutes or more, cut it down to 15 to 20 minutes. Again, he just needs to be active. He needs to get up and be mobile. How about getting a stationary bike? Now, you're going to have to find a stationary bike that'll hold a 400-pound person. If they're out there, get him a good stationary bike. Have him start riding that if the issue is impact on the knees and joints. How about swimming? Swimming is low impact. Those are all important. Get him up and moving. Now, the most important thing, though, is going to be diet. He needs to cut down his surplus calories, and the best way to do that, and this will happen the fastest, this will be more than even getting up and moving, have him cut all the processed sugar out of his diet, all the high fat foods out of his diet, all the processed refined junk, take it out of his diet. Start with soda. Start with anything with liquid calories. If he drinks something, it needs to be calorie free. Water, black coffee, diet soda. Cut out fried foods, fast food, stuff like that. Start focusing on whole foods. Get rid of liquid calories. You know what? I promise you, someone who's 400 pounds, getting a little stationary bike and just cutting out liquid calories and fried foods, that is just a start. He'll probably lose 50 pounds just from that, just from those minor changes alone. So you've got to get him up and moving, but you have to do so in a way that's not causing extra problems for his ankles, knees, swelling, all the edema that comes with all of that, because that will happen. Then he's got to get his diet under control, and it doesn't have to be a super strict diet. Someone who's 400 pounds can get down to 300 pounds without a strict diet. You just have to cut out the liquid calories and the fried foods and the fast food. That's usually the things that need to go for that first 50 to 100 pounds. Believe it or not, that will actually do it. And just get him to be active as much as he can. And if he can't walk for 30 minutes without problems, then don't have him walk for 30 minutes without problems. Lose 50 pounds and then come back and work on that further. But that's the main thing, is getting diet and caloric intake under control, and you can do that by the things I described. Because honestly, someone who's 400 pounds can eat a lot of food and still lose weight. Even if they're just getting up walking 15 minutes a day. If they're spending 30 minutes a day on their exercise bike, they can probably eat a massive amount of calories and lose 50 pounds still. But you've got to get the really, really calorically dense foods out of the diet. That's the first couple of steps. All right, next question. Let's say I'm coming off of a cut and want to start a bulk. What would be the potential impact, benefits, risk of keeping my calories either below or at maintenance, eating macros and micro sufficient meals so that I am exceeding my needs for nutrients, but then spend one day as a massive cheat day and a huge caloric surplus, eating less nutrient dense food? Well, the risk, it's not going to work very well on your bulk. Let me put it this way. You guys notice how my scale trickled up over time, right? I got up to over 250 while still doing cardio every day and still lifting heavy 3 days a week, right? That's more or less kind of what I did. I tried this approach recently, actually exactly what you're describing, but I didn't have a cheat day. I had a cheat evening, meaning a few hours once a week I ate as much pizza and junk food and garbage as I wanted, and the scale slowly trickled up by me doing this, and I gained more fat than I gained muscle doing so. That's the exact effect. And the rest of the week, the other 6.5 days a week, I did my cardio every day, I did my lifting, I focused on progress, and sorry guys, my dog is barking, my new puppy. I ended up gaining too much fat, and here's the reality of it. You're a surplus from a single day. How much of that is really going to turn into muscle? Like, you gain muscle over the course of a week. You're gaining muscle every day when you're bulking. If you're only supplying the nutrition to gain muscle 1 day a week, and you're not the other 6, you're really only going to grow that 1 day a week. So you're actually probably going to gain, if you were to gain the same amount of weight doing that with 1 cheat day every week, you're more likely, particularly just because you're eating whatever and it's going to be higher fat foods, and you're getting most of your surplus on 1 day. Well, you're only going to gain a fraction of an ounce of muscle on that day. But if you're gaining a full pound or a half pound on that day every week, the majority of it's going to be body fat. So I don't really think this is the best approach. Depending upon the person, like you said, it's almost unlimited calories. You might find it's not going to work. You're probably going to be better eating a surplus at least 3 of your days a week. Maybe immediately after your heaviest training days, eat a little bit of a small caloric surplus there, and you could eat maintenance the other days, or you could just eat a really small caloric surplus every day, and that would probably be a lot better in terms of body composition. All right, next question. Many people advocate active rest to facilitate better recovery by increasing blood flow and nutrient delivery to the recovering muscles, low impact cardio the day after squats. Would this potentially interfere with muscle fiber adaptation taking place from the previous day's training? I'm going to say probably not. Probably not, specifically on off days, but even then, what you need to remember, you can balance very large volumes of endurance work with maximum strength work. It can be done. Alex Fiat has done a lot of work with hybrid athletes on this. I mean, even Greg Knuckles has come out and said that doing endurance work is better for the strength athlete in the long term. Any negative effects that you suffer are going to tend to be in the very short term, and once you adapt, you'll be fine. Now, that being said, you're talking about doing it on the next day. You've made the majority of your adaptations to a squatting session within 24 hours, right? And I think the physiology agrees with that. You've made most of your gains in the first 24 hours. You're certainly not going to be impacted by any amount of cardio you probably do the next day unless it creates a caloric deficit. If it's enough to create a caloric deficit, that might interfere with overall growth, and it might interfere, say, with glycogen stores that you have for the next training session coming up tomorrow. If you're squatting 3 days a week, for example, that could become problematic, at least until you adapt or you get your calories and everything balanced and you get used to the training parameters. But no, I don't think it's going to be a problem at all. It really isn't. Even doing large bouts of it. Like I said, I do 3 hours of cardio a day of lifts myself, and it doesn't interfere with my deadlift strength or any of that at all, as you guys have seen. So, all right, next question and last question of the week. You're training with a close grip, and if you were to compete or just try maxing out just for the sake of knowing what you're capable of, would you change your grip? Well, my question would be, what did I do in meets? Back when I was competing on camera, didn't I bring my grip out a little bit? Now, I didn't do ultra wide grip. Why? Because to me, the potential risk to my shoulder and the doing something that only allows you to use more weight on the bar rather than allowing you to recruit more muscle fibers isn't necessarily ideal for overall strength. So basically it's just changing your leverages. You're not doing more work. So no, generally I'm not real big on training real wide, and only on competing really wide. With that's something I might say you would do in competition if it's going to make or break you in competition. But why would you ever just do maxes randomly? Meaning, if you're on a specified program, do you really care what your 1 rep max is right now in this phase of your training? Of course not. If you want to hit a max, you need to spend time preparing for a max. Like, there's no way I would recommend anyone just test their max randomly without spending 3 or 4 weeks peaking for it. Like, prepare for it, because different phases of your training, your max isn't going to be at its potential versus if you actually were to get ready for it and hit a peak. There's a tremendous difference. Particularly, let's say you've been in a higher volume, higher rep phase of your training. You've been doing 5 sets of 10 on your bench press for a 3-week phase. Do you really think that the very next workout that's going to facilitate an ideal 1 rep max? It might have put on a lot of muscle. It might have been a good hypertrophy phase, but you need a lower rep phase immediately before you do that to even test your max. So I wouldn't recommend doing that at all. I don't believe in just seeing what you're capable of. No, you prepare ahead of time and you calculate what you're going to be capable of based upon your training numbers. All right. Again, that's for kids. Testing to see what you're capable of. You need to know what you're capable of. If you're a serious lifter, you should be able to calculate your training numbers and their rate of perceived exertion and know plus or minus 2 to 3% what your real max is. You should be able to know ahead of time. You don't just check and see. That's silly. That causes injuries. That causes other problems. So no, I'm not big on that. Same thing with the wider grip. If you're going to switch to a wider grip because you're going to hit a max, you need to spend several weeks preparing for that, because you're changing your leverages, you're changing your technique slightly. You might have built most of the motor patterns and the muscle mass and the base strength to do it, but if you really want to be ideal with it, you need to prepare for it. All right, and that's the difference, and that's what people need to understand when you start messing with variations of exercises. To really know your strength on those variations, you actually test them ahead of time. People always say, well, why don't you do this? Because you say that this exercise isn't that hard to hit those numbers. Why don't you go do it? Because I would need to spend 3 weeks preparing. There's no way I would go do something silly like a rack pull without preparing. There's no way I would do something like a slingshot bench without training with the slingshot for several weeks to see where my max is. You just wouldn't do that. Same thing with the wider grip. It's like I recommend to people, like for me, when I was prepping for meets, I close grip most of the year. When I go into meet prep, I bring my hands out 1 inch wider each week. Each week I bring my hands out 1 inch wider till I'm at the width where I want to compete at. And you prepare for that ahead of time. Just do it randomly, when you're doing something like that. Because to prepare for a max is not something I would recommend you do just because. It should probably be done because you either want to document it, say you're videoing it, or most likely for a competitive environment. And if you really want to hit your real max you're capable of, you need to spend several weeks ramping up to it and peaking so that you really see what you're capable of doing. Not just a random test, because it doesn't matter what you hit on a lift in the off season in any competitive environment. What matters is what can you do when you've prepared for it and you're ready in a competitive environment. Just hitting maxes without preparing for them is actually a good way to get hurt. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.